Welcome to Summary of the Week, your quick guide to the top headlines. Today is Saturday, December 6th. Here's a recap of some of the major events this week. Russian drones and missiles struck Ukraine for 2 nights in a row over the weekend, with air raid sirens in Kyiv sounding for nearly 12 hours on Saturday. During the first attack, 2 people were confirmed dead in Kyiv and more than a dozen were injured. The strikes, which hit nearly all districts of the capital, also cut power and water to western Kyiv. A day later, a Russian drone hit a residential building in Vyshhorod, just north of Kyiv, setting it ablaze. The attack killed 1 person and injured several others. The victim, an engineer at Ukrainian defense firm Firepoint, which produces the Flamingo missile, was later identified by the company. One of Firepoint's co-founders condemned the strike, saying that although Kyiv knows where Russian arms engineers live, it does not target residential buildings in retaliation. On early Saturday, 2 oil tankers under Western sanctions erupted in flames following reported explosions off Turkey's Black Sea coast, prompting Ankara to dispatch multiple rescue ships to the scene. Hours later, Ukraine's security service, the SBU, claimed responsibility for the attack, saying it used Sea Baby naval drones in one of Kyiv's major escalations against Russian oil shipments as the tankers were heading toward Russia's Novorossiysk to load a new shipment of oil. Despite the attack, Turkish authorities said all crew members were safely evacuated. On Sunday, Kyiv's delegation, made up of senior diplomats and top commanders, met with U.S. negotiators to discuss Trump's latest peace plan. The talks took place at the Miami resort developed by Trump's Russia envoy Steve Witkoff and focused on Kyiv's position ahead of Witkoff's planned trip to Moscow. While the details of the discussions remain private, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the goal is not only to end the war, but also to help Ukraine be safe forever, so they never face another invasion, and to usher in an age of true prosperity through economic developments. Kyiv expressed some optimism, praising what it called the Super U.S. team. On Monday, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the war must end as soon as possible, after visiting Paris to meet French President Emmanuel Macron. Their talks lasted hours, with Zelensky hinting that security guarantees were a key part of their discussions following Sunday's Miami meetings, where unnamed U.S. officials say options were explored that could bypass Kyiv's constitutional red lines. Also on Monday, Zelensky and Macron joined a call with Trump's Russia envoy Witkoff, Ukraine's delegation head Umerov, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer to clarify details from Sunday's talks, before Witkoff heads to Moscow on Tuesday to meet Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin. Also on Monday, Ukraine's 3rd Army Corps denied Russian claims that the villages of Stavky and Novoslivka, near the stronghold of Lyman, had been captured. The Corps said Russia is using an old tactic, sending troops to film propaganda videos, and accused Russian commanders of reporting fictional achievements to appease superiors. A commander from Ukraine's 60th Separate Mechanized Brigade who fought in the sector also rejected the claims, saying the front remains stable. In a new interview, Admiral Giuseppe Cavo Dragone told the Financial Times that NATO is considering more proactive measures in response to Russia's escalating hybrid warfare, which has included cyber attacks, sabotage, and airspace violations. While no final decision has been made, Dragone said some could view NATO's planned response as preemptive. He added that the alliance has sometimes been too reactive, particularly in cyber defense, and may need to act more aggressively to deter further Russian attacks. On Tuesday, top U.S. negotiators arrived in Moscow for high-stakes talks, presenting a revised peace draft to the Kremlin. The team, led by Trump's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner and Trump's Russia envoy Witkoff, held a closed-door meeting with the Russian team that lasted over 5 hours. There were few details on what was discussed, but a planned meeting between Witkoff and President Zelensky in Brussels was reportedly canceled after the Kremlin suggested the U.S. team take their findings directly back to Washington, D.C. Ushakov, a top Kremlin advisor involved in the talks, said there were no immediate compromises, but noted that some progress had been made. Earlier the same day, China's top diplomat Wang Yi visited Moscow for high-level talks with Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The meeting was part of the 20th round of Russian-Chinese strategic security consultations. While neither side offered many concrete details, both celebrated positive ties and said they would deepen cooperation across various areas, including security. Ahead of the high-stakes U.S. talks, Putin held a press conference outlining points that reinforced Russia's maximalist positions. He warned that if Europe chooses to start a war, Russia is ready, while claiming he has no intention of initiating conflict. He also rejected Europe's counter-proposal to Trump's peace plan, calling the conditions unacceptable and insisting that Europe must account for what he described as Russia's battlefield gains. Kremlin aide Ushakov, who took part in Tuesday's talks with U.S. negotiators, said Ukraine's NATO membership bid was a key topic during the closed-door discussions without specifying the details. He also claimed that the U.S. has promised to factor in Russian positions, adding that Russia's battlefield gains have influenced the course of the conversation. Beyond that, the Kremlin advisor offered little concrete information on what was discussed. On Wednesday, the EU agreed to ban all imports of Russian gas into the bloc by autumn 2027. The ban on long-term contracts will take effect no later than November 1st, 2027 for pipeline-delivered gas, and from January 1st, 2027 for liquefied natural gas, LNG. However, Budapest protested the decision, reiterating that it would challenge it before the European Court of Justice, just days after Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán assured Putin that Hungary would continue buying Russian gas. Also on Wednesday, a court in Ukraine's Odessa ordered a 40-day detention for two men suspected of murdering a 21-year-old Ukrainian man in Vienna, Austria. The victim, rumored to be the son of Kharkiv's deputy mayor, was found in a burning car on November 26th. The two suspects were arrested in Ukraine on Saturday shortly after returning. Austrian authorities accused them of coercing the victim to transfer money from his cryptocurrency account before beating him and setting his car on fire. It remains unclear whether the trial will take place in Ukraine or if the suspects will be extradited to Austria. On Thursday, reports indicated that leaders from Belgium and Finland hold a relatively pessimistic view of Ukraine's future and ongoing battlefield developments. Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever, who opposes the EU's planned reparations loan using frozen Russian assets held in Belgium, described Russia's defeat as a fable, a total illusion, adding that it might not even be desirable for Russia to lose if it risks instability in a nuclear-armed country. Meanwhile, Finnish President Alexander Stubb said a justified peace for Ukraine appears unlikely under the current trajectory. Finland's prime minister also ruled out providing direct security guarantees for Kyiv, noting that Helsinki will support a broader future security framework for Ukraine without being directly involved in the guarantees. At the same time, a transcript obtained by the German outlet Der Spiegel suggested growing mistrust between European leaders and the US. According to the report, which remains unconfirmed, some leaders reportedly warned President Volodymyr Zelensky to be cautious in ongoing US negotiations, expressing concern that Europe and Ukraine may have been sidelined or thrown under the bus by the Trump administration. The tone of the conversation contradicted the message of unity promoted by European leaders in US-backed peace talks, suggesting that Europe remains worried that America's push to end the war at any cost could come at a high price for the continent without adequately addressing the Russian threat. There are also conflicting reports regarding the return of Ukrainian children, coming a day after the UN passed a resolution demanding that Russia repatriate them. In a rare press release, US First Lady Melania Trump praised the successful return of 7 children from Russia to their families in Ukraine, an otherwise positive development. However, the report is overshadowed by a statement from Ukraine's human rights ombudsman, who said that a rights group has identified at least 165 Russian re-education camps for Ukrainian children, some of which are reportedly located in North Korea. Some children have already been sent to the Songdo-in summer camp on North Korea's eastern coast. On Friday, the Trump administration released a new national security strategy calling for a freeze on NATO expansion while criticizing European sovereignty. The document claims that some unnamed European governments hold unrealistic expectations regarding Russia's war in Ukraine despite being unstable minority governments, and that many have been trampling on basic principles of democracy to suppress opposition, language that echoes earlier, unsubstantiated criticism from US Vice President J.D. Vance during his Munich visit this year. However, the strategy also emphasizes that the US cannot afford to write Europe off, despite these assessments. No previous US strategy has used such language, signaling a potential freeze in NATO's open door policy at a moment when Ukraine is seeking a membership roadmap. On the second day of Putin's visit to India, the two leaders already discussed energy, a key point behind the US's previous decision to impose massive tariffs on India. As the US and Russia appear to have eased tensions over sanctions, with the US Treasury relaxing some overseas restrictions, Putin reportedly offered Prime Minister Modi uninterrupted shipments of fuel to India. In another major sign of a widening transatlantic rift, the United States has conveyed to Europe that it will no longer remain NATO's primary conventional defense provider beyond 2027. A senior Pentagon official said the Indo-Pacific remains the administration's overriding priority and that Washington cannot fight two wars at once, meaning earlier hints of a strategic shift away from Europe are now official. One senior Western official told the Kyiv Post that the United States is no longer the automatic first responder, while another European official said the timeline is fixed. On Ukraine, however, the US is reportedly open to increasing arms deliveries before Christmas, according to the sources. What happens after that remains uncertain as peace talks take shape, and Washington's broader strategy continues to shift. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next Saturday.